He was rushing through a dark tunnel with head-spinning speed, lying on a section car that was no less than 2 meters long. There was a light smell of burning in the air, and Artyom thought with astonishment that it must be fueled with petrol. There were 4 people apart from him sitting on the section car, and there was a big brown dog with a black undercoat. One of them was the guy who had hit Artyom across the cheeks. There was a bearded guy in a hat with ear flaps that had a red star sewn onto it, and onto his quilted jacket too. He had a long machine gun dangling down his back, one just like the hoe that Artyom had before, but there was a bayonet knife screwed onto its barrel. The third person was a big fellow whose face Artyom didn't see at once, but when he did, he almost jumped off the car. His skin was very dark. Artyom looked at it a bit more and calmed down. He wasn't a dark one. His shade of skin wasn't the same as theirs, and he had a normal human face with slightly outturned lips and a flat nose like a boxer's. The last guy had a relatively regular appearance, but he had a beautiful brace face and a strong chin, which reminded him of something on a poster at Pushkinskaya. He had dressed in a beautiful leather coat, which was tied with a wide belt with 2 rows of holes in it and an officer's sword belt, and from the belt hung a holster of impressive size. There was a Yarya machine gun at the back of the section car, and a fluttering red flag. When a beam from the lantern accidentally fell on the flag, he could see that it wasn't really a flag, but a ragged piece of material with the red and black face of a bearded man on it. All this seemed more like some kind of terrible delirium than the miraculous rescue that Hunter had made for him when he ruthlessly cut his way through Pushkinskaya. He regained consciousness. The narrow-eyed man said joyfully, "So, hangman, what did they get you for?" He spoke totally without accent. His pronunciation was no different than Artyom's or Sukhoi. That was very strange, hearing pure Russian speech from such an unusual being. Artyom couldn't shed the feeling that this was some kind of farce, and the narrow-eyed man was only moving his lips while the bearded guy or the man in the leather coat spoke from behind him. "I shot one of their officers," he admitted reluctantly. "Well, good for you. You're just the kind we like. That's what they deserve," the man with the high cheekbones said enthusiastically, and the big, dark-skinned guy who was sitting at the front turned to Artyom and raised his eyebrows respectfully. Artyom thought this guy must mispronounce words. "That means we didn't create such a scene for nothing," he smiled broadly. He also had a flawless accent, so that Artyom was confused and now didn't know what to think. "What's your name, hero?" the handsome man in leather asked him, and Artyom introduced himself. "I'm Conrad Rusakov. This is Comrade Bonsai." He pointed to the narrow-eyed man. "This is Comrade Maxim." The dark-skinned one grinned again. "And this is Comrade Fyodor." The dog came last. Artyom wouldn't have been surprised if he'd been called Comrade too, but the dog was simply called Carrots Sayupa. Artyom shook their hands one by one. The strong, dry hand of Comrade Yusakov, the narrow, firm palm of Comrade Bonsai, Maxim's black shovel of a hand, and a fleshy hand of Comrade Fyodor. He earnestly tried to remember all their names, especially the hard-to-pronounce Karatsyupa, but it seemed that they called each other different names anyway. They addressed the main guy as Comrade Commissar, and the dark-skinned one they called Maximka, or Lumumba. The narrow-eyed one was simply Bonsai, and the bearded one with the hat with ear flaps they called Uncle Fyodor. Welcome to the 1st International Red Fighting Brigade of the Moscow Metropolitan in the name of Ernesto Che Guevara, Comrade Rusakov triumphantly announced. Artem thanked him and fell silent, looking around. The name was very long, and the ending of it generally blended into something quite unclear. For a while, the red color had an effect on Artyom, not unlike its effect on a bull, and the word brigade was associated for him with Zenya's stories about the gangster lawlessness somewhere near Shabalovskaya. Most of all, he was intrigued by the face trembling on the cloth in the wind, and he timidly asked, "And who have you got there on your flag?" At the last second, he decided on the word flag, having almost said rag. "That, my brother, is Che Guevara," Bonsai explained to him. Which Che Guevara, Artyom hadn't understood, but seeing rage fill Rusakov's eyes and the mocking smile on Maximkov's face, he figured out that he had done something foolish. Comrade Ernesto Che Guevara, the commissar rapped the separate syllables. The great Cuban revolutionary. Now the sounds were all more distinct than it still wasn't intelligible to Artyom, but he decided to widen his ears enthusiastically and say nothing. After all, these people had saved his life, and angering them right now with his ignorance would be impolite. The tunnel's soldered ribs flashed past fantastically quickly, and during the length of their conversation, they had already managed to fly through one half-empty station and stopped in the twilight of the tunnel beyond it. Here, at the side, there was a little dead-end offshoot where they could stop. "Let's see if the fascist reptiles dare to go after us," said Comrade Rusakov. Now, they had to whisper very quietly because Comrades Rusakov and Karatsayupa were attentively listening for sounds coming from the darkness. "Why did you do it? Rescue me?" Artyom asked, trying to choose the right words. "It was a planned sortie. Some information arrived," explained Bonsai, smiling mysteriously. "About me?" Artyom asked, in the hope that he could believe Khan's words about his special mission. "No, just in general," Bonsai made an indistinct gesture. "We heard they were planning some kind of atrocity. Some comrade commissaire decided we had to stop it. Besides, it's our mission to bother them constantly. They haven't put up roadblocks on this side, not even a bright torch, just a few outposts with simple fires," Maximkov added. "We ran over them straight away. Sadly, we had to use the machine gun. But then there was the smoke bomb. We had gas masks, and we took you, our homegrown SS man, and went back." Uncle Fyodor, silent and smoking some kind of weed in a pipe, the smoke from which started to make his eyes tear up, suddenly said, "Yes, my young friend, it's good that you were appropriated. Do you want a little brew?" And picking up a half-empty bottle of some kind of murky swill from an iron box, he shook it and offered it to Artyom. It was going to take a lot of bravery to take a sip. It went down like sandpaper, but he felt as though a vice that had been clamped inside him this last 24 hours had relaxed. "So are you Reds?" he asked cautiously. "We, my brother, are communists, revolutionaries," Bonsai said proudly. From the red line, Artyom leaned in. "No, just simple communists," the man answered, a bit hesitantly, and hurried to add, Comrade Commissaire will explain it all to you. He's in charge of the ideology here. Comrade Rusakov, having returned after a few minutes, informed them all is quiet. His handsome, masculine face radiated a sense of calm. We can take a break. There was nothing with which to build a fire. They hung the little kettle over the camping stove and cut up some cold pork. The revolutionaries ate suspiciously well. No, Comrade Artyom, we aren't from the Red Line, Comrade Rusakov declared firmly when Bonsai related the question to him. Comrade Moskvin has taken the position of Stalin, turned his back on a metro-wide revolution, officially denouncing the interstational and cutting off support for revolutionary activities. He's a renegade and he's a compromiser. Us comrades, we are sticking to Trotsky's line of thinking. You could even draw parallels between Castro and Che Guevara. That's why he's on our fighting banner. And he pointed to the sad, hanging rag with a broad gesture. We have remained true to the revolutionary idea, unlike the collaborationist Comrade Moskvin. Us, comrades, we condemn them in their line. Aha, and who gives you fuel? Uncle Fyodor added, puffing on his rolled-up cigarette. Comrade Yusakov flushed and threw a vicious look at Uncle Fyodor. Fyodor just mockingly tooted and took a deeper pull on his cigarette. Artyom understood little from the commissaire's explanation apart from the main thing. These people had little in common with the Reds, who intended to string Mikhail Porfirovich's guts up onto a stick and shoot him at the same time. This calmed him, and in an effort to give a good impression, he twinkled. Stalin, that's the one in the mausoleum, right? But this time, he'd gone too far. An angry spasm deformed the beautiful and brave face of Comrade Rusakov. Bonsai turned away, and even Uncle Fyodor frowned. No, it's Lenin in the mausoleum. Artyom hurried to correct himself. The stern wrinkles on Comrade Rusakov's high forehead smoothed out, and he said severely, "You still need lots of work, Comrade Artyom." Artyom really didn't want Comrade Rusakov to work on him, but he restrained himself and said nothing in reply. He really understood little about politics, but it had started to interest him, and therefore he waited until the storm had passed and ventured. "So why are you against the fascists? I mean, I'm also against them, but you guys are revolutionaries after all. These reptiles, because of Spain, because of Ernst Thälmann in the Second World War." Comrade Rusakov spat through his clenching teeth, and though Artyom didn't understand a word of it, he didn't want to make a show of his ignorance yet again. Once they poured boiling water into the mugs, they all became more lively. Bonsai took to exhausting Uncle Fyodor with foolish questions, obviously trying to tease him, and Maximka, having sat down closer to Comrade Rusakov, asked quietly, "So tell me, Comrade Commissaire, what does Marxism-Leninism say about headless mutants? It has bothered me for a long time. I want to be ideologically strong, and I'm drawing a blank on this one." His dazzling white teeth sparkled in a guilty smile. "Well, you see, Comrade Maxim," the commissaire replied after a delay, "this, my brother, is not a simple matter," and he started thinking hard. Artyom was also interested in how the mutants were seen from a political point of view, and, indeed, he was interested to learn if they existed at all. But Comrade Rusakov was silent, and Artyom's thoughts slid back down the the track that he had managed to get out of in the last few days. He needed to get to Polis. He was saved by a miracle. He'd been given one more chance, perhaps his last. His whole body hurt. He had a hard time breathing deep. Deep breaths would set him off coughing, and he couldn't open one eye. He wanted to stay with these people very much. He felt much more calm and confident with them, and the darkness of the unfamiliar tunnel was not condensing around him and oppressing him. The rustling and scratching that flew up from the black boughs didn't frighten him, didn't put him on his guard, and he hoped that this respite would last forever. It was sweet to relive his rescue again and again, even though death had been chomping its iron teeth just above his head, barely brushing against him. The sticky body paralyzing fear that had seized him before his execution had already evaporated. The last remnants hidden under his heart and his stomach had been burnt out by the poisonous homebrew of the bearded comrade. Fyodor himself and the friendly Bonsai, and the serious leather-clad commissaire and the enormous Maxim Lumumba. It was so easy with them in a way that he had never experienced since he left VDNKH 100 years before. None of his belongings were in his possession anymore. The wonderful new machine gun, the 5 magazines of cartridges, the passport, the food, the key, 2 flashlights, they were all lost, left with the fascist. All he had was a jacket, some trousers, and a twisted cartridge case in his pocket. The executioner had said, maybe it will come in useful. So what now? To stay here with the fighters of the Interstational, the brigadiers well, it's not important. To live their life and forget his own. No, never. He mustn't stop for a minute, mustn't rest. He had no right. This wasn't his life anymore. His fate belonged to others from the moment he agreed to Hunter's proposal. It was too late now. He had to go. There was no other option. He sat there quietly for a long time, thinking about nothing in particular. But the gloomy determination was ripening within him with every second, in his emaciated muscles, in his stretched and aching veins. He was like a soft toy from which all the sawdust had been drawn, and it has become a shapeless rag that someone has cruelly hung on a metal skeleton. He wasn't himself anymore. He had been scattered together with the sawdust which was picked up by a tunnel drought, broken up into particles, and now someone new had taken up residence inside his skin. Someone who didn't want to hear the desperate entreaties of his bleeding and exhausted body. Someone who crushed underfoot the desire to surrender, to stay still, to have a rest, to give up before the endeavor had a chance to assume a complete and realized form. This other person had taken the decision on the level of instinct, and he bypassed consciousness, in which there now reigned silence and emptiness. The usual continuous flow of internal dialogue was cut off. It was like meandering spring inside Artyom. It was like a meandering spring inside Artyom had been made straight. He got up to his feet and with wooden and awkward movements, and the commissary looked at him in surprise, and Maxim even lowered his hand to his machine gun. Comrade Commissary, could I speak with you? Artyom asked in a toneless voice. Then Bonsai turned around anxiously, disengaged from the unfortunate Uncle Fyodor. Say it straight, Comrade Artyom. I don't have any secrets from my fighters, the commissary cautiously responded. You see, I am very grateful to you all for saving me. I have nothing with which to repay you. I would really like to remain with you, but I can't. I have to go on. I have to." The commissary said nothing in reply. "Well, where are you going?" Uncle Fyodor interjected unexpectedly. Artyom pressed his lips together and looked at the floor. An awkward silence hung in the air. It seemed to him that they were now looking at him tensely and suspiciously, trying to guess at his intentions. Was he a spy? Was he a traitor? Why was he being so secretive? "Well, if you don't want to say, then don't," Uncle Fyodor said in a conciliatory tone. To Polis, Artyom couldn't resist telling them. He couldn't risk losing the trust for the sake of some silly conspiracy theory. "You have some kind of business there?" Uncle Fyodor inquired with an innocent look. Artyom nodded silently. Is it urgent?" the man continued to probe. "Well, look, we're not going to hold you back. You don't want to talk about your business, then fine. But we can't just leave you here in the middle of the tunnel, right, guys?" He turned to the others. Bonsai resolutely nodded. Maximka took his hands from the barrel of his gun and also confirmed this sentiment. Then Comrade Rusakov stepped in. "Are you prepared, Comrade Artyom, in front of the fighters of this brigade who have saved your life, to swear that you are not planning any harm to the revolutionary cause?" he asked severely. "I swear it," Artyom answered readily. He had no intentions of harming the revolution. There were more important things to consider. Comrade Rusakov looked at him in the eye long and hard, and finally gave his verdict. "Comrade fighters, personally, I believe Comrade Artyom. I ask you to vote for helping him to reach Polis." Uncle Fyodor was the first to raise his hand, and Artyom thought that it was probably him who had lifted him out of the noose, and Maxim voted, and Bonsai just nodded. "You see, Comrade Artyom, not far from here, there is a passage that is known to the wider mass, or masses. It joins Zamenskaya branch in the Red Line," said the commander. "We can set you on your way." He didn't manage to finish his sentence because Sayupa, who had been lying quietly by his feet until then, jumped up suddenly and started to bark deafeningly. Comrade Lusakov whipped his pistol out of its holster with a lightning-fast movement. Artyom didn't have time to see what everyone else did. Bonsai had already pulled the cord, starting the engine. Maxim took up his position at the rear, and Uncle Fyodor took a bottle with a match sticking out of its top from the box and had held his homebrew. The tunnel at that point dived downwards, so visibility was very bad, but the dog continued to strain, and Artyom felt anxious. "Give me a machine gun, too," he asked in a whisper. Not far away, a powerful flashlight flashed and went out. Then they heard someone barking out orders. Heavy boots trudged along the cross ties, and someone stumbled quietly, and then everything fell silent. Sayupa, whose muzzle had been clamped shut by the commissary, struggled free and started to bark again. "It's not starting," Bonsai mumbled, silently defeated. "We have to push it." Artyom was first to climb off the section car, and behind him leapt Uncle Fyodor, and then Maxim. With effort, they wedged the soles of their feet against the cross ties, and got the large object moving forward. It was shifting too slowly, and when they had finally awoken the engine, which started off by making coughing sounds, boots were thundering very near to them. Fire came the order from the darkness, and a narrow space of the tunnel filled with sound. At least 4 cartridges roared past them, and bullets beat randomly around them, ricocheting, spitting sparks, and hitting pipes and making them ring out. Artyom thought that they had no way out, but Maxim, straightening out to his full height, held his machine gun in hands, and maintained fire for a long time. The automatic weapons went silent. Then the section car moved a bit more easily, and they had to start running after it to jump up onto its platform. They're retreating. Push ahead, was the cry from behind. The automatic machine guns rattled away behind them with redoubled strength, but most of the bullets hit the walls and ceilings of the tunnel. Swiftly setting the stub of the bottle on fire, Uncle Fyodor wrapped it in some rags and threw it onto the path. A minute later, there was a bright flash and the same clap of noise that Artyom heard when he was standing with the noose around his neck. With the noose around his neck rang out. And again, more smoke. Comrade Rusakov ordered. A motorized section car is simply a miracle, Artyom thought as their persecutors fell far behind, trying to fight their way through the curtain of smoke. The vehicle was moving easily forward and scaring away the staring bystanders. It swooped. Novokuznetsk station, where Comrade Rusakov flatly refused to stop. They were carried through so quickly that Artyom had barely any time to make out the station at all. There wasn't anything particularly special about it, apart from the meager lighting. There was a fair number of people there, but Bonsai whispered to him that the station was not good at all, and its inhabitants were also a bit strange. The last time they tried to stop there, they had seriously regretted it, and only just managed to drag themselves out.